You wake up thinking if you lose a battle, you lose power. Meanwhile, someone smarter, colder, more ruthless is wiping out your support, leaving no trace. The world doesn't reward unfinished business. It rewards whoever closes the deal. Survival isn't for the kind. Survival is for those who study the rules. Those who master the rules. They don't just survive. They dominate. This is Law 15, crush your enemy totally. It means, when you strike, leave nothing for them to rebuild on. No grudges simmering. No allies left to whisper revenge. Destroy not only their power, but their will, their influence, their future. This is the intelligence that watches from the shadows, calculates 3 moves ahead, and strikes when everyone else is distracted. Before you go deeper, understand this. These principles exist whether you choose them or not. Predators already know them. You deserve to know them too. Treat it as self-defense, protection, not petty cruelty. Now, if you follow what you're about to hear, by the end of this talk, your sense of danger will sharpen. You'll see threats rising before they form. And you'll know how to act decisively. Type in the comments, I choose power over permission. Now let me show you how the most dangerous people in history applied this law, and how you can protect yourself starting today. When you deal with someone who wants to undermine you, you cannot leave doors cracked open. Half victories feel comfortable, but they are traps dressed like progress. When you walk away thinking the fight is over, your opponent often walks away plotting the sequel. The enemy you leave standing becomes the enemy who studies you. The threat you silence halfway becomes the threat that returns with sharper tools and colder intentions. Law 15 exists because unfinished business becomes unfinished danger. Machiavelli warned that injured enemies who survive their injuries recover with twice the hatred. He wrote that a small wound does not remove an adversary. Now let me break this down. Humans rarely accept loss as final. Pride forces them to reshape the narrative in their head. They tell themselves you were lucky, not strong. They tell themselves their downfall was temporary. And when you let them hold on to those inner stories, you feed the tiny spark that eventually becomes the flame of revenge. This is why half victories feel good in the moment, but cost you peace in the long run. You think you spared someone to show mercy, when in reality you spared someone who was waiting for the perfect moment to hit you where you least expect it. Look at real life. Think about a workplace where you stopped someone's attempt to sabotage you, but you let them stay in the meeting, stay in the group, stay in the inner circle. You wanted to be the bigger person, but weeks later, they poisoned your reputation again, slowly, quietly, smiling at you during lunchtime as if nothing happened. That is what a half victory creates. The same happens in friendships where someone betrays you once and you forgive them too fast. You feel noble. They feel emboldened. What you thought was healing was actually them gathering information for their next strike. Humans repeat behavior when the consequences were small. But here is where it becomes dangerous. When someone loses but still has allies, they still have leverage. When they lose but still have influence, they still have oxygen. When they lose but still believe they can return, they sharpen themselves in private. The problem is not that they hate you. The problem is that you left them with the ability to act on that hate. Power players close doors with finality, not cruelty finality. Instead of punishing the person, they eliminate the conditions that give that person a chance to retaliate. They remove the influence. They remove the access. They remove the stage. Weak people let the threat linger because they fear confrontation. Strong players finish what they start so it never returns to bite them when their guard is down. Look at modern power dynamics. When a major streaming platform pushes out a competitor, it does not stop at taking a bit of market share. It buys content rights, locks creators into exclusive deals, and tightens every possible pressure point until there is no pathway back for the rival. When Apple launches a new feature, it does not introduce it slowly to test the waters. It reshapes the market standards instantly, leaving competitors scrambling for relevance. These are not acts of cruelty. These are acts of strategic finality. But here is the ethical warning. Never chase total defeat out of ego. Never crush someone who trusted you. This principle is for self-defense, not domination for pleasure. When someone is actively threatening your progress, your peace, or your future, you owe it to yourself to end that threat completely and cleanly. Remember this: an enemy half defeated is an enemy half alive. And anything half alive learns how to crawl back. When you face someone who threatens your progress, the visible person is rarely the whole threat. There is always a circle around them: the encouragers, the whisperers, the quiet allies who feed their confidence. If you only defeat the individual, you leave the web around them untouched, and that web can rebuild a fallen enemy faster than you expect. Law 15 teaches you that the true battlefield is never the person in front of you, but the infrastructure that keeps them strong behind the scenes. Machiavelli warned that enemies gain strength, not from themselves alone, but from those who support them in the shadows. Now let me break this down. Every challenge you face comes from two forces: the opponent's action and the ecosystem that empowers them. Psychology shows that humans rarely act alone. When someone decides to undermine you, that impulse is usually backed by a circle that reinforces their belief that they can get away with it. Maybe it is colleagues who pretend to stay neutral while secretly enjoying the drama. Maybe it is friends who hype them up, telling them you are an easy target. Maybe it is online followers who reward their behavior with attention. When you strike only at the person, but leave their reputation untouched, their allies still believe in them. And those allies become the hands that lift them back into your path later. Think about the last time someone tried to sabotage you at work. You handled the situation directly, maybe even confronted them, but you ignored the people who quietly nodded along in meetings when the sabotage was happening. They were not punished. They were not exposed. They were not brought into the light. So, even though your enemy backed off, the network stayed alive. And networks are dangerous because they rebuild fallen villains, like a body regenerates damaged tissue. What looks like silence is usually strategy forming inside the circle around them. But here is where the danger grows. Reputation is a kind of armor. When you defeat the person but allow their reputation to remain polished, they return even stronger. A reputation untouched means their supporters still believe they deserve influence. That influence becomes fuel. That fuel becomes action, and that action becomes your next problem. Stronger, smarter, colder. Power players understand this instinctively. Instead of attacking the individual, they attack the story that surrounds the individual. They chip away at the myth, not the man. They expose lies, not to embarrass, but to separate the enemy from their supporters. They make it clear that siding with this person leads to consequences. They reduce the oxygen available to the opposition, not by cruelty, but by suffocating the illusions that kept that opposition alive. Look at modern business. When a major platform dethrones a competitor, it does not simply outperform the rival. It targets the partnerships, advertising deals, and create a loyalty that give the competitor strength. When a political figure loses relevance, it is rarely because they were removed directly. It happens because their network fractures, donors pull away, supporters feel betrayed, and the power structure around them collapses. The individual becomes powerless, not because they were defeated, but because they were abandoned. Or consider the world of entertainment. A celebrity scandal rarely becomes career-ending because of the mistake itself. Careers collapse when brands withdraw, collaborators disappear, and public trust erodes. The mistake is the match. The loss of the network is the wildfire. But here is the ethical boundary. Do not destroy reputations for sport. Do not weaken networks out of ego. Use this principle only when someone has proven themselves a genuine threat to your peace, your integrity, or your future. Your goal is not cruelty. Your goal is protection. If someone is actively trying to take from you, you are allowed to dismantle the structures that give them the power to keep attacking. Remember this. The enemy you see is only the leaf. The network behind them is the root. Cut the leaf and it grows back. Cut the root and the tree finally stops leaning over your path. When someone chooses to challenge you, they are gambling on the belief that they can escape the fallout. The moment you make that escape route vanish, their confidence collapses. Law 15 teaches that power is not only about what you do, but about what your opponent believes they can still do. If they think they can recover, they will fight. If they sense the path back is sealed, they retreat into silence. Your job is to make that path look not only blocked, but gone forever. Machiavelli warned that when you strike an enemy, you must strike in a way that removes every possibility of return. Now let me break this down. Human psychology relies heavily on perceived options. When people feel they have alternatives, they become bold. Think about the last time someone talked reckless behind your back. They felt safe because they believed there would be minimal consequences. They believed they could smooth things over later, that they could charm their way back into your circle, that they could rebuild whatever gets damaged. That sense of safety is what fuels betrayal. But when you show them that their actions carry consequences they cannot undo, their courage evaporates. Humans become cautious when they sense finality. The moment someone realizes there is no second chance, no bridge to rebuild, no apology strong enough to undo the damage, their entire posture shifts, their voice lowers. Their aggression dissolves. Their behavior becomes careful not because they fear you as a person, but because they fear the permanence of the outcome. The reason this works is simple. People are more afraid of being trapped than being hurt. A temporary punishment can be endured, but an irreversible outcome triggers deep psychological panic. It forces the mind to back down, to negotiate, to surrender. This is why total rulers, powerful CEOs, influential leaders, and strategic operators always create the illusion that certain lines cannot be uncrossed twice. They let others know that if you push too far, the fallout follows you forever. Think about workplace dynamics. If someone tries to undermine you publicly and you respond with a mild correction, they feel they can attempt it again. But if you confront their behavior with forceful clarity, bring the truth into the open, and make it clear that the damage they cause cannot be undone, you shut down the possibility of repeat behavior. Now the room understands that challenging you carries a cost that does not fade with time. The enemy sees that their mistake carved something permanent, something they cannot repaint into a sweeter memory. But here is where the danger grows. If people sense that you will forgive too easily, they gamble on your softness. If they sense that you will hesitate, they push boundaries. If they sense that consequences are shallow, they keep testing you. Projecting irreversible consequences is not about cruelty. It is about signaling that certain betrayals come with outcomes that reshape the relationship forever. Not as punishment, but as structure. People respect walls more than warnings. Look at modern culture. When a major company fires a high-level executive for misconduct, notice what happens next. They remove their access, revoke their authority, and publicly distance themselves. This sends a message that any violation of core trust is terminal. The executive cannot simply return with an apology. The door is sealed. And the industry watches, the public watches. Everyone recalibrates their behavior based on the finality of that outcome. Or take the world of online influence. When a creator crosses a line and loses brand partnerships, the loss is not temporary. Those opportunities do not magically reappear. The consequence is long-term, sometimes permanent. The message is simple. Some actions carry costs that cannot be reversed. This keeps entire communities careful, but here is the ethical boundary. Do not use irreversible consequences to terrorize good people. Do not close doors on those who make honest mistakes. Reserve this level of finality for those who consciously weaponize your trust, your time, or your position. You are not aiming to crush the innocent. You are aiming to protect your peace from repeat offenders. Remember this. Threats survive when they believe they can return. Take away their hope, and the battle ends before it begins. Material defeat is never the real end of a threat. The true danger lives in the spirit of the opponent, the stubborn spark that tells them they can rise again. Law 15 teaches that the surest way to stop future rebellion is not by removing resources, but by removing hope. When an enemy feels they still have a chance, they will gather themselves in the dark and try again. When they feel the story is over, their fight dissolves. Crushing the will is more powerful than crushing the body, because the body recovers, but the mind remembers. Machiavelli warned that the enemy who keeps his pride intact will return, while the enemy who loses his spirit becomes harmless. Now, let me break this down. Human beings are creatures of narrative. The story they tell themselves is the fuel that pushes them into conflict. When someone challenges you, they do it because they believe they can win, or because they believe you are too soft to finish the job. The moment you take that belief away, their internal fire goes cold. Humiliation works not because it embarrasses them, but because it removes the illusion of power they held. Dominance works not because it hurts them, but because it erases the fantasy that they can stand beside you as an equal opponent. Think about the last time someone pushed past your boundaries. Maybe they raised their voice, tried to undercut you, or attempted to make you look small in front of others. If you responded gently, they felt justified. If you responded halfway, they felt encouraged. But if you responded with a calm, unshakable presence that showed their attempt had zero effect, you did something deeper than win the argument. You broke the psychological reward they expected to gain from confronting you. Once that reward disappears, their motivation disappears with it. Inside workplaces, this effect is everywhere. When someone tries to challenge a leader and the leader allows the disrespect to slide, the challenger grows confident. But when a leader addresses the challenge with precision, clarity, and unmistakable authority, the challenger loses not only the moment, but the momentum. Their allies see the shift, the room sees the shift. The challenger senses the weight of finality. The mind retreats long before the body does. But here is where the danger rises. If you only defeat someone physically, financially, or socially, they can rebuild their position. But if you defeat them psychologically, they lose interest in the fight itself. People do not return to wars that feel unwinnable. They only return when they believe the balance can still tilt in their favor. Your dominance must be unmistakable, not aggressive but undeniable, the kind that lets the opponent know that the hill they hope to climb has no peak left. Look at modern culture. When a company crushes a competitor, the most decisive tactic is not the product itself, but the perception that the competitor can no longer compete. That perception spreads faster than facts. Investors withdraw. Partners step back. Consumers shift loyalty. The competitor might still be alive, but their confidence has evaporated. The market does not abandon them because they lost money. The market abandons them because they lost belief or consider public debates. The person who loses is not always the one with weaker arguments, but the one who loses composure. The moment the crowd senses that someone has been emotionally outmaneuvered, the debate ends long before the words do. Psychological finality settles in the air like a curtain dropping, but here is the ethical boundary. Never humiliate someone who made an honest mistake. Never break the spirit of someone who meant no harm. Psychological finality is a defensive tool, not a toy. Use it only when someone knowingly threatens your peace, your reputation, or your future. The point is to end conflict, not to create more. Remember this. The strongest enemy is the one who still believes. Once belief dies, the battle is already over. There is a strange law of human conflict that repeats itself across offices, families, creative circles, and every space where influence swirls, delay grows ghosts. Whenever you wait to address a brewing challenge, you give the other side time to rebuild their courage, gather allies, or rewrite the story in their favor. Hesitation becomes a quiet greenhouse where resentment and resistance thrive. Decisiveness, by contrast, closes the door before the storm can blow through it. Swift action does not mean cruelty or aggression, it means clarity. It means you respond when the tension is still fresh, not after it has fermented into something sharp and sour. When someone challenges your position, spreads doubt about your worth, or tests the strength of your boundaries, your immediate response carries the weight of finality. It tells the room, the world, and the opponent that you are not confused about what you stand for. Think of it as emotional gravity. The moment you act with steadiness and speed, everything around you recalibrates. People who were uncertain about whom to support suddenly see the terrain more clearly. The challenger, expecting a soft or delayed reaction, feels the ground shift under their feet. You are not giving them space to rewrite their intentions. You are not giving them time to whisper explanations to others. You are setting the tone before they can set their own. Delayed action, on the other hand, breeds ambiguity, and ambiguity is fuel for future conflict. When you let disrespect linger, the offender begins to imagine that their behavior was harmless or justified. Silence feels like permission. Even if you eventually respond, the delay gives them enough room to craft excuses, gather sympathy, or pretend they never meant anything harmful. By the time you speak, the narrative may already belong to them. In workplaces, this effect is almost theatrical. A manager who avoids addressing problems right away loses authority without even noticing. Team members sense the hesitation and begin to test the limits. Minor disruptions evolve into larger ones. Rumors spread. The air thickens with second guesses. But when a leader addresses an issue swiftly, without anger, but with unmistakable decisiveness, the entire environment steadies. No one needs to guess where the line is. The line shines like a lantern. In personal relationships, swift action is even more vital. If someone repeatedly violates your boundaries and you delay responding, they learn to treat your silence as softness. The pattern deepens. The dynamic warps. Soon you find yourself managing a garden of problems that could have been a single weed. Acting promptly protects not only your dignity but the relationship itself, because unresolved tension eventually becomes corrosion. Of course, decisiveness must be guided by fairness. Never strike down someone who simply misunderstood. Never harden your tone with a friend who meant well, but stumbled. The decisiveness you wield should feel like a lighthouse beam, not a blade. Your goal is to prevent confusion, not to punish. The swiftness makes the message cleaner, and the clarity keeps the peace intact. The deeper purpose of this lesson is to keep small conflicts small. When you address them quickly, they dissolve before transforming into something monstrous. When you let them fester, they evolve into stories people tell behind closed doors, into whispered alliances, into narratives that require far more effort to resolve. Swift action is an act of mercy toward your future self. And here is the secret folded inside the lesson. Decisiveness is not about controlling others. It is about mastering your own narrative. The moment you choose prompt clarity, you become the author of the moment instead of letting the moment author you. Hesitation hands the pen to your opponent. Swift action takes it back. Move with steadiness. Move with purpose. When a challenge appears, address it before it grows teeth. In that timely firmness, you protect your path, your peace, and the life you are building. When the dust of a conflict finally settles, most people relax. They celebrate too early, as if the silence itself were a loyal servant. But the old thinkers knew the silent ground is rarely empty. It is usually seeded with roots you cannot see yet. This is why, after overcoming an adversary, the wise do not simply walk away. They understand that what remains after a clash is often more dangerous than the clash itself. Remnants have a strange way of gathering in the shadows, nursing memory into motive, and motive into fire. A victory that is not secured becomes a wound that never stops whispering. Guarding the aftermath is an art of awareness. It requires seeing beyond the obvious, listening past the applause, and reading the faint tremors that live beneath the surface. Every adversary has a network, even if small, even if quiet. These are the threads that tie yesterday's conflict to tomorrow's surprise attack. If you cut the enemy but leave the threads intact, they will pull themselves together again, stitched by resentment and restored by time. Your triumph becomes the very spark that fuels their return. To protect your future, you must observe every remaining influence that could gather into a counterforce. This doesn't mean cruelty or chaos. It means clarity. Remove the conditions that allowed the opposition to rise in the first place. Close the corridors where whispers circulate. Dissolve alliances formed in the dark. Transform neutral bystanders into allies, or at least into entities with no reason to resist your direction. Power is not a throne you sit on, it's a landscape you maintain. There is a quiet danger in half measures. When you restrain yourself out of sentiment or fatigue, the loose ends take on a life of their own. Resentment is like smoke that slips through cracks, curling into corners you ignored. The defeated often feel a stronger need to reclaim dignity than they ever had to pursue victory. And dignity, when wounded, can become a weapon. By failing to secure the aftermath, you leave open doors for ghosts to walk back through. True finality is not about destruction, it is about transformation. Bring former rivals into a new order where they no longer benefit from opposition. Give them roles that remove their incentive for sabotage. Redirect their energy into work that supports the structure you are building. The goal is not to multiply enemies. The goal is to eliminate the reasons enemies exist. If this cannot be done through alignment, then it must be done through containment. Both paths serve the same purpose, ensuring the conflict does not regenerate itself. To guard the aftermath also means guarding your mind. Once a battle feels finished, the temptation is to grow complacent, to let the sharpness of your attention soften. Avoid this, stay awake. Study the terrain of relationships, loyalties, and ambitions. People rarely stay defeated in their hearts. They rebuild their pride in fragments, gathering it piece by piece, until it becomes a blade pointed quietly at your back. Power requires a long memory. You must remember what the defeated will not forget. By tending to the aftermath with precision, patience, and wide awareness, you create a future where no hidden faction can rise again, no old friend can turn into a sudden threat, and no shadow can grow bold enough to challenge the light you command. This is how you turn a single victory into lasting stability, by ensuring nothing left behind can ever return to strike. When people speak of victory, they usually imagine the clash itself, the noise, the tension, the collision of wills. But the wise know the real prize waits afterward. In the quiet, a win that ends with nothing more than a raised flag is a wasted opportunity. A win that reshapes how others perceive you becomes a shield that guards you long after the battlefield cools. Reputation, when sharpened correctly, is more powerful than any blade drawn in the moment. Total victory does not simply remove the challenger, it sends a message that sings through the air long after the smoke has vanished. Others watch. They study how you responded, how deeply you pressed, and whether your resolve carried the weight of permanence. When your victory is complete, unmistakable, and absolute, you create a boundary in the minds of potential adversaries. They think twice, then a third time, before even imagining confrontation. This hesitation becomes your silent armor. The world pays attention to patterns. When you win thoroughly again and again, you form a myth around yourself. Not a fantasy, but a psychological presence that moves ahead of you. Those who would oppose you begin to calculate not only the risk of loss, but the certainty of consequence. They sense that stepping against you means stepping into a storm that never forgets, never hesitates, never leaves loose ends for future threats. Your previous victories announce themselves before you do. But to wield reputation as a weapon, you must first understand the anatomy of perception. People fear what is predictable in its severity. They fear the figure who finishes what they start. They fear the person who is known to never retreat, never bargain with betrayal, never allow an enemy to rise again. When you demonstrate finality in your actions, others begin writing the rest of the story for you, filling the gaps with their own anxieties. Your name alone becomes a quiet deterrent. Of course, reputation is not about theatrics. Displays of rage or arrogance weaken the very foundation you are building. The strongest reputation comes from calm execution, a sense that your victories are not emotional outbursts, but deliberate moves shaped by discipline. When your wins feel precise rather than chaotic, you become someone who cannot be manipulated or provoked. That calmness is frightening in its own way. It shows that you do not need noise to enforce consequence. Total victory also brings clarity. It signals to future challengers that there is no space to test you, no room to slide through cracks, no chance to nibble at the edges of your territory. You are not merely defending ground, you are defining the rules. And when you define the rules, others either follow them or fall away from the field entirely. This does not mean becoming cruel for the sake of cruelty. It means ensuring the field is stable, free of lingering threats that drain your energy. Reputation can save you from future battles, not by eliminating conflict, but by shaping the choices others make before conflict even begins. An adversary who imagines only a small risk will move quickly. An adversary who imagines utter defeat, permanent loss, or irreversible consequences will stay still. The human mind avoids pain, especially pain that echoes into the future. Your job is to make sure your past victories echo loudly enough that no one forgets them. When your reputation grows into a force of its own, you no longer fight for dominance. Dominance flows around you like an unseen current. The wise never boast about this. They let others speak, whisper, warn, and retell the stories that build the aura around their name. This aura is not vanity. It is armor. It is the quiet storm on the edge of the horizon that keeps wanderers from stepping too close. Total victory, secured with clarity and remembered with precision, becomes a lighthouse and a warning tower at the same time. It lights the path for those aligned with you, and it casts long shadows for those who dare to challenge you. That is how reputation becomes your strongest weapon, not through noise, but through the memory of what you have already proven. You just heard 7 layers of law, 15 from the 48 laws of power, but knowledge locked in your head changes nothing. Now pick one lesson, just one, focus on it for the next week. Practice it in small things, a negotiation, a conflict, a decision. Don't try to master all at once. Pick the one that speaks to your current battle. Remember, use this to guard yourself, not to harm the innocent. This isn't about cruelty for its own sake. This is about protection. Using power as a shield, not a hammer for every misstep. Imagine a world where good people understand power as well as bad people do. You don't have to become a predator, just don't be prey. There are 2 paths ahead. One, you remain passive, vulnerable, waiting for someone else to strike. The other, you become strategically aware, always 10 steps ahead. Not to control others, but never to be controlled. Which version of yourself will you build starting tomorrow? If you believe in power, real power, not permission, take it. Comment, which of the 7 lessons hit you hardest? Tell me in the comments. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Stay sharp, stay ethical, stay 10 steps ahead,